full circle. Dr. Matthew A. Johnson is the writer. I'm Willi Rose, and we are on Chapter 12, the Southern Oregon Habituation Area, or SOHA. During the summer of 2011, I took Cynthia and her two youngest children, Claire and Morgan, to the Southern Oregon Habituation Area. By this time, I was in transition from the old school approach to the habituation research method. I left all of the high-tech equipment at home. I started putting the food out in large stainless steel dog food bowls, which I referred to as gifting bowls. I was no longer baiting a big, dumb, giant mountain ape. I was now trying to establish a trusting relationship with a sentient being with paranormal abilities. By the way, another way of saying paranormal abilities is to simply say beings who have the ability to manipulate quantum mechanics. The four of us set up camp, and then we went for a hike. We were off-road and off-trail, deep in the woods. As we were walking, Claire pointed out an interesting indentation in the ground, which had been covered up by leaves that fell from the trees above. I carefully removed the leaves from the impression and found a large adult male Bigfoot track. It was 22 inches long, 9 inches across at the toes, and 6 inches across at the heel. It dwarfed my size 16 shoes, which are 14 and 1/2 inches long. The impression had obviously been made several months earlier when the ground was very moist. By this time, the summer sun had baked the ground hard. I was talking about what it would take to cast the track when Morgan pointed out another track, which was only about 8 feet away from the impression that Claire discovered. Once again, I carefully removed the leaves from the impression in the ground. It turned out that we discovered an adult female track that was about 17 inches long. The cool thing about Morgan's discovery is that after closer examination, there was a juvenile track inside the mother's track. It reminded me of when I was a kid and our family would occasionally visit the beach in Seaside, Oregon. As a young child, I would have fun following my mother and trying to step from one of her tracks in the sand to the next track in the sand. It was clear to me that the juvenile Bigfoot was having fun doing likewise with his or her mom. I left Cynthia and her kids behind to explore the area while I drove off the mountain to purchase some plaster of Paris. I also bought some food coloring so I could dye the plaster with 2 separate colors when I casted the combined mother and juvenile track. I returned to SOHA and casted the tracks while teaching both Claire and Morgan how to do so. It was a very nice day, and I enjoyed spending time with all of them. That night we conducted a night sit far away from the SOHA base camp. To be honest, I wanted to conduct the night sit there because I didn't feel comfortable having them up close and personal at the SOHA base camp, which was a much smaller area. Claire and Morgan had a fun time playing some kind of pretend ninja fighting game. I'm sure that the younger Bigfoot forest people enjoyed watching them play with one another. Then we sang, and Cynthia played her flute for a while. After the sun went down, we noticed some silhouettes and eye glow around the perimeter. There wasn't much activity around us, and it was getting late. We turned on our flashlights and walked back through the woods in order to return to the SOHA base camp. We climbed into our tent and started to go to sleep. As I lay there, I was pleased that we had such an awesome experience for their first Bigfooting trip. Around 4 a.m., I was woken up by some noise outside the tent. I remained still and quiet. I could clearly hear 2 sets of bipedal steps tiptoeing around camp. I nudged Cynthia a couple of times until she woke up. Then I whispered in her ear, "They're here. They're tiptoeing around the base camp and checking out our stuff." Cynthia acknowledged that she could hear them too. My heart was pounding because I was so excited. Cynthia fell back to sleep, and I nudged her a couple of times again. I whispered to her, "They're still here. Stay awake so you can listen to them." She said that she would and then immediately fell back to sleep. She was exhausted from all of the driving that she had done in the days before coming to Soha. I decided to let her sleep, and I lay quietly on my back inside the tent and continued to listen. I could hear them pick things up off the table, obviously checking out the objects and then put them back down on the table. I could hear them take items out of the garbage bag, check things out, and then stuff them back inside the garbage bag. Finally, I heard them unzip the zipper on a duffel bag, check things out, finally zipping the bag back up again. Then I heard them walk out of camp. After that, I fell asleep. Around 7:30 a.m., I woke up again. I could hear the younger Bigfoot forest people at the 2 o'clock position on the perimeter. They were moving around and whispering to one another. Cynthia woke up right around this time, and I whispered to her, "They're right on the other side of the bushes on that side of the tent. They're only about 8 feet away from us." Suddenly, one of them picked up a very large piece of wood and threw it into the brush right near our tent, which was followed by a very loud thud. Then they ran away from us near the 3 o'clock position on the perimeter. Both Cynthia and I chuckled because they were behaving like two young pranksters having fun together. When we got out of the tent, we took our time checking out all of the items in our camp, although we could tell that some items had been looked at and moved ever so subtly. Absolutely nothing was missing. The only thing that was out of place was Morgan's duffel bag that had been removed from the camp chair and placed on the ground. Everything else that they had looked at had been put back into the same place they found it. It was our first family trip up in the mountains bigfooting together. It was also going to be our last bigfooting trip together as a family. Both Claire and Morgan weren't thrilled about getting back out there. I was more excited about the 2 tracks that they found than they were. I told them that they were the best tracks I've ever seen pulled out of the ground in all my years of bigfooting. They gave me the tracks. Love those kids. In May of 2012, I went to Soha with my buddy Carl Hakler and my son Grady. Carl was a former Bigfoot Field Research Organization investigator. He was also a Medford SWAT cop who had served overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq. We conducted our night sit inside the Soha base camp rather than hiking so far away. It proved to be a great decision. We had lots of activity on the perimeter. We observed silhouettes, heard several heavy bipedal steps, as well as some tree knocks up close and personal. Although I had made the decision to leave all of the high-tech equipment at home, I decided to try something new. I purchased a bionic ear parabolic microphone dish so I could start recording what was going on around the Soha base camp at night while we were sleeping. I didn't think it would be a problem because it was a passive technology which was anchored down in the base camp. There was absolutely nothing aggressive or invasive about the device at all. I started recording all night long for anywhere from 8 hours to 12 hours. That night, Carl, Grady, and I went to bed inside the tent after I set up the parabolic microphone dish and digital Sony recorder. I explained to Grady the necessity of remaining quiet while I'm recording. I told him that it was okay for him to whisper to me, but that he should not be overly rambunctious. He is a good kid, well-behaved, and did a wonderful job of following the protocol that I was slowly but surely establishing in Soha. I will eventually describe the protocol that I established so you can attempt to replicate it in your own research area. The next morning, Grady woke me up from my sleep and whispered in my ear, "Dad, I have to go to the bathroom." I directed him to go ahead and leave the tent and use the porta potty. He unzipped the flap of the tent and went outside to use the toilet, and then he came back into the tent and whispered, "Dad, the water jug is too heavy for me to pick up and flush the toilet." I apologized to him and told him to go ahead and use the toilet and that I would be right outside. I was half asleep and should have realized that before I sent him outside on his own. After we returned home from Soha, I had to start listening to my audio recordings. I listened to every second and never skipped around. I was afraid that I would miss something if I didn't exercise the discipline and take the time to listen to every sound. It was like going to Soha twice in one trip. I was amazed at how much activity was going on at night while we were asleep inside the tent. Well, I eventually reached the moment when Grady left the tent for the first time to use the porta potty. He came back inside the tent and then went back outside again. While listening to the audio recordings, I heard something that blew my mind. It was a game changer for me. When Grady exited the tent the first time, the parabolic microphone dish and Sony digital recorder captured the adolescent Bigfoot forest person on the perimeter, whispering, "Ay, ay, ay, yet." The second time Grady exited the tent, the adolescent male uttered the same word once again, "Ay, ay, ay, yet." No way, they have a spoken language. This didn't sound anything like the samurai chatter that Ron Moorhead recorded up in the Sierra Mountains during the 1970s. Instead, what I recorded sounded like a North American Indian language with staccato syllables. Later on, I played the recording for an Indian friend who is a member of the Klamath Indian tribe in southern Oregon. She said that the word was very similar to one of the words in their vocabulary that means urination. I was blown away. However, the fun was just beginning in Soha. As I continued to record all night long, every night I was there, I was coming up with more and more spoken language. I was recording them singing and humming. I recorded a crying baby Bigfoot shortly after its birth. The mother could be heard comforting the baby all night long as it cried and fussed. I recorded one of them tapping out a drum solo on the camp stove table after I had played the 11-minute drum solo from Iron Butterfly's song, Inagata Davida, a 1960s classic. As time progressed in Soha, I found it necessary to establish a strict protocol that would guide the behaviors and attitudes of all the guests that I was bringing up on the mountain with me. The protocol was also established for my own behaviors and attitudes. I also created a strict protocol in order to remain consistent and predictable to the Bigfoot forest people. I concluded that if I behaved in a consistent and predictable manner, it would eventually make it easier for them to trust me. Here's the protocol that I established over time in Soha, instructed my guests to follow in a strict manner, and followed religiously with great results. I'm sharing my protocol with you in order to help you improve your results in your research area. Others who have listened, learned, and implemented my protocol in their areas have reported back to me with great success, too. Number 1. Upon arrival, I would park my vehicle in the Soha base camp in the same exact spot every time. I tried to discourage others from driving their vehicles to Soha. Instead, I encouraged them to park their cars lower on the mountain, throw their gear in my truck, and ride up the hill with me. There simply wasn't enough room for multiple vehicles to park in Soha. Also, the road to Soha is rutty, overgrown with vegetation that has scratched the heck out of my vehicles and torn the mirrors off my Suburban, and quite frankly, the road is becoming dangerous and will eventually become impassable. 2. Immediately upon exiting my vehicle, I would grab the large cowbell and ring it at the 2 o'clock position on the perimeter of the base camp, non-stop for 1 minute. I would pause for 30 seconds and then do it again. If my guests were interested in ringing the cowbell, I would allow them to take turns. 3. Before we did anything else, we would set up the base camp in the same exact manner every time. The campfire was always in the same spot, Eventually, we stopped using campfires or any sorts of light at all. My reasoning was because if they thought we were going to try and light them up if we heard or saw anything on the perimeter, they would keep their distance. Also, keeping the camp dark with a no lights policy was a demonstration of trust towards our Bigfoot forest people friends. I'll talk more about this later in the book. 4. We positioned our camp chairs in the same exact spot every time. 5. We put the camp table and garbage bag in the same spot every time. Yes, you read that correctly. We placed the garbage bag inside the base camp for the exact reason that you're not supposed to leave the garbage bag inside of camp. I wanted to see what wild animals were in the area. I wanted them to come into the camp. None ever did. Yes, you read that correctly. No animals ever came into base camp while we were there during a 10-year period of time. That's significant data. 6. We placed our storage bins in the same exact spot every time. 7. Like clockwork, at sunset every night, we would place the gifting bowls outside of the Soha base camp approximately 150 feet away. The bowls were always washed squeaky clean while wearing surgical gloves. We never served the food in dirty bowls. We also removed any and all fingerprints from the bowls, so if we found any fingerprints on the bowls in the morning, we knew that they didn't belong to us. As we carried the bowls from the base camp to their position, we would sing 2 repetitions of "Row, row, row your boat," and then whistle the tune once. A couple of years later, I recorded the adult female Bigfoot humming the tune. We would place the gifting bowls on the ground in the same exact spot every time. Then we would take a before picture and then head back to the base camp. Once we reached the base camp, we would never breach the perimeter of the base camp until the sunrise the following morning. They needed to know that we weren't going to try to light them up, and we weren't going to try to chase them through the woods either. 8. Also, we always placed a dozen eggs out every night next to the gifting bowls. The eggs functioned as a control variable to rule out the possibility of little critters hitting the gifting bowls. By the way, when opportunistic little critters hit any source of food left out for them, they always make a mess. The next morning, it always looks like nuclear devastation. Also, opportunistic little critters will always take the eggs. They would never leave eggs behind. On the other hand, the Bigfoot forest people are very neat, clean, and never overindulge. They're only interested in taking what they want. Most often than not, they wouldn't touch the eggs. Although on one occasion they cracked 2 eggs in half, swallowed the yolk, and then placed 1/2 shell inside the other half shell, and then placed both back inside the egg carton. The little critter would never do that. 9. Once we placed the gifting bowls outside of camp and we would return to camp, we would always introduce ourselves by saying our first names only while tapping our own chest. Eventually, I recorded them over 15 times saying my name, Matt. Then we would play instruments, sing songs, whistle tunes, and I would play music on my MP3 player while attached to my portable Bose speaker. The Bigfoot forest people love, love, love music. They especially love music when your heart is into what you're singing or playing. We never played heavy metal or rap music. No loud, angry, negative, aggressive music allowed. We played instrumental music, Native American music, melancholy pop music, classical music, female vocals, children singing, and music with a beat. Once again, we eventually learned that the most important thing is that your heart is into the music that you play, sing, or whistle to them. That's how they connect with you. If your heart isn't into the music that you're playing, you will not draw them in. 10. Regarding bathroom options, we established a place inside the base camp where the women felt comfortable using the porta potty. They were not allowed to pee and poop outside of the base camp. The guys also had to use the porta potty to poop. They also weren't allowed to poop outside of camp. The guys had 2 designated spots on the perimeter of the base camp where they could pee. However, they had to say, "I'm just going potty, just going potty, just going potty." This way, the Bigfoot forest people knew why the men were approaching the perimeter, and it wasn't because we were going to try and chase them. Finally, I didn't think it was appropriate to pee and poop outside of the base camp where the Bigfoot forest people were walking around the perimeter. We didn't want them stepping on our biological messes and getting upset with us. 11. Like clockwork, at sunrise every morning, we would retrieve the gifting bowls while wearing surgical gloves. Before touching the bowls, we would take an after picture. This gave us a means of comparison with the before picture from the previous night. By collecting the bowls while wearing surgical gloves, we wouldn't put any fingerprints on the bowls while we were checking the bowls out for fingerprints. Sometimes we had to lightly breathe on the bowls to eliminate any fingerprints that were left behind. However, more often than not, the fingerprints stood out like a sore thumb. Pun intended. 12. We would eat breakfast in camp, go off the mountain during the day in order to give the Bigfoot forest people some space, and then return in the late afternoon and start the protocol all over again. While off the mountain, I would take my guests sightseeing to the local various tourist sites in southern Oregon, such as Crater Lake, the Oregon Caves, the Redwood Forest, the California coast, and the Hellgate jet boat excursion ride on the Rogue River, including an awesome buffet dinner in a rustic lodge setting. Regardless of where we ate our one large meal at a restaurant while off the mountain, we would always use their toilet before returning to Soha. Then we would go to the grocery store, buy snacks and beverages for the evening, and fresh food for breakfast the next morning. Now, to be honest, you can create your own protocol for your own area. The important thing is that you must be persistent and consistent. All of the above helped to make myself and my guests predictable. Predictability made us dependable. Dependability made us trustworthy. Trustworthiness eventually brought the Bigfoot forest people closer and closer and closer for improved and desired personal interactions. My goal has always been to have the Bigfoot forest people feel comfortable enough to come into camp, hang out, and hold one of their young ones on my lap. It's going to happen someday soon. I'm 100% confident. That's the end of Chapter 12. Chapter 13 is coming right up, taking a stroll down memory lane. Again, you're listening to the book, Bigfoot, A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose.